Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm just going to give a brief technology introduction before we get started to highlight some of the platform features. The webinar today is being recorded, and we do have a chat panel available for questions or comments or any tech issues that you might have today. Most tech issues can be resolved with refreshing your browser. But if you do have some trouble, you can just let us know in the chat box there. And it looks like many of you are starting to enter your name and state and role. So thank you for that. And then if you accidentally do close the chat, video, or slide panel today, you can restore your view by clicking on the restore icon, which if you see the row of blue buttons along the bottom of your screen, the restore button is all the way to the left and it looks like a rewind arrow. So now I will pass it over to Patty Ryan to get us started.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We're so excited. As Sarah said, I'm Patty Ryan. I'm with the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance. And our center is funded by the Administration for Children and Families, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Office of Child Care, the Office of Head Start, and also Health Resources and Services Administration. I'm noticing in the chat that there are a few family child care providers in the audience, which is great. I do want to tell you that this webinar today is primarily focused for center-based programs, and we do have a webinar that we're offering also on Saturday that's focused for family child care providers. So please know that. A couple things to let you know. Today we'll hear from Shannon Christian with the Office of Child Care. Then we're so excited to have our partners with First Children's Finance who are going to walk through the federal resources that are available to you and hopefully provide you with information that will help you access these resources. At the conclusion of the First Children's Finance presentation, we will have question and answer time. Please feel free to go ahead and type your questions in as the presentation progresses. It's a 90-minute presentation. Those questions that we don't get to at the end, these resources will all be on our webpage and also made available through a variety of our partners' websites with frequently asked questions and answers to some of the questions that you may have. And so with that, we are so excited to have Shannon Christian here to welcome us. And so Shannon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patty. I'm Shannon Christian. I'm the director of the Office of Child Care. This is my last day because of the change in administration. So I wanted to just be able to see how this effort is going. We know from the last, everything we heard about the last round of this PPP funding and some of the related funding streams that the child care field had a very hard time successfully accessing that funding. And so we'll hear a little bit about the changes in the funding today, but we also want to let you know that we've made a huge commitment to helping the providers better understand those funding opportunities and how to apply successfully. And this is just the first step, as Patty alluded to. There's more coming. I can't emphasize enough the importance of going after this money, the various funding streams, whatever's right for you, because although childcare was in the news a lot since the beginning of the pandemic and starting in August when Congress was talking about giving us more money, there were estimates of giving us up to $50 billion, and instead we got 10, but Small Business Administration got a couple $100 billion for this purpose. So they are going to have more ability to help you, even though there's more competition with all these other small businesses than we necessarily have, because we will spread our $10 billion out among the states, territories, and tribes that get funding from the Office of Child Care. We are the office that funds the Child Care Subsidy Program, the Child Care Development Fund, and that money can be used both to subsidize working families' child care, but also to invest in quality enhancements for the whole field. And with the coronavirus, we've had also an extra request from Congress to try to help stabilize the field overall. So this money, we'd have more of it, and we do more than we used to. But it's a big challenge. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with us, but we have a lot of technical assistance centers, and Patty is with one of them. And so we have a lot of ability to reach out and help providers through the states and other people who get our funding. And we also have a lot of money for to do early childhood and child care research. So I hope that you stay in touch with us over time, but most of all, I hope you are successful at getting this money. So I'll be turning my responsibilities over to my deputy, Dr. Ellen Wheatley, until the Biden administration refills my position. So thank you for letting me make one last address and sit in on your program. Patty, back to you.
Thanks, Shannon, and we're so grateful for your leadership and your support in this endeavor, and really are so excited now to turn it over to our partners at First Children's Finance, who they're going to share everything that you need to know about the PPP and the EIDL. So with that, Heidi.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Heidi Hagelbraid. I'm the Chief Program Officer at First Children's Finance, and I want to welcome you to our webinar this morning. A couple of notes before we get going. First Children's Finance works on the business and finance side of childcare. We partner with both family childcare providers and childcare centers, but today's webinar really focuses on childcare centers. And as Patty mentioned earlier, there's another specific webinar on Saturday for family childcare, but there's lots of great information in both of these sessions. Today's webinar is going to be very fast-paced and very comprehensive, but I want to reassure you that even though we're going to go through a lot of information quickly today, this session will be recorded and available to you at a later time so that you can go back and reflect on some things that we might go through quickly, that you'll be able to share it, you'll be able to pause it maybe as you're working out your own application, and you can make referrals back to this information if you are someone who's providing technical assistance to child care centers. Before I hand it over to the rest of our presenters from First Children's Finance, I want to thank our team, two people you'll meet today, Molly Sullivan, our Director of National Initiatives, and Ann McSweeney, who is our Business Development Specialist. They're in Minnesota and Massachusetts, respectively. But I also want to give acknowledgement to Tasia Harden, Linda Duncan, and Benji Nikolai, who also helped to develop the content today. As we get going here, I want to just make sure that we are acknowledging some of the important things today. To note that this document is funded by the Child Care Communications Management Center, which is funded by the Office of Child Care, Administration for Children and Families, Department of Health and Human Services, and was developed in partnership with the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance. And we'll put up one more thing here. That is another disclaimer at the beginning that I think is important to note, is that the materials provided today does not constitute legal, accounting, tax, or finance advice or any other professional services. If you are looking for additional information specific to your business, you should consult a member of the First Children's Finance staff or another qualified professional. Anyone who is participating today should know that the materials produced by First Children's Finance are intended for direct use by child care program owners, directors, administrators, and or board members to benefit their own programs. And then here we go. This is what we're going to talk about today. Our agenda is to talk about the purpose of the federal opportunities, talk a little bit about eligibility and the important factors to note about eligibility, give you a sense of what kinds of materials that you're going to need to pull together, a tutorial on the applications. We're going to go step by step today. And then we're going to talk about how to advocate for your business as you are moving through this process and where to find additional support should you need it. One of the things that I think is important to note is that many programs, childcare centers, did not apply for the PPP or the EIDL funding in the spring and the summer of 2020. And we want to encourage you to consider all of the funding options that are available to you currently to sustain your critical business at this time. Childcare has never been more important to economic recovery, and there are important opportunities that we do not want you to miss out on. This webinar largely is a how-to tutorial for childcare centers, but I think it's important to note a couple of things, is that there can be many different changes in information as this program rolls out across the country, and you should always make sure that you are eligible first. Look for your state's Small Business Administration Office to find out which financial institutions are participating in the payroll protection program in your state. And also, before you begin, gather account numbers, tax ID numbers, and tax forms that you'll need to have on hand to complete your application. And with that, I am going to pass it off to my colleague, Molly Sullivan.
Thanks, Heidi. I am thrilled to be with all of you today. I would love to be able to advance the slides if possible. So I'm just letting Sarah or Violetta know that I'm unable to advance those slides. So today we're thrilled to present thank you so much. The how-to and some information about how to apply for 2 federal funding sources. These may not be the entire list of funding sources which will be available to your childcare business, depending on where your business is located, what business type you have, etc. There are many variables to take into account in seeking COVID-19 relief funding, and only you can make the best decision for your business. But First Children's Finance today will present information about both the economic disaster loan, injury disaster loan, and the payroll protection program. We'll use the acronyms EIDL and PPP to move things along. If your childcare business is eligible, you can receive either or both of these. So you'll want to understand, what are these recovery loans and grants? So the first thing to know is that the EIDL is a true loan. If you've ever taken out a loan before, you know you have to pay it back, whereas the PPP may have some portions of it forgiven depending on how it's spent. You apply for these 2 sources of funding in different places. You'll apply for the EIDL directly from the Small Business Administration, whereas for the PPP, you'll apply through a lender, a financial institution. There are various terms and amounts of money available and various forgiveness conditions for the PPP. We are going to really focus on how to pursue these funding sources today, if that's something of interest to you, because we know that you'll take the time to go through all of the various repayment options and terms as appropriate for your business. So I think if I was a child care center director listening to this webinar, the number one thing I'd want to know is, what can I use these funding sources for? So they can be used for a variety of operational costs, such as payroll, utility, mortgage, rent, etc. What they can't be used for is any personal finances, financial needs you might have, business expansion, or things like that. So you'll have to think about which of these federal funding sources is right for your business, if either. Again, there will be a family childcare business focused webinar presented on Saturday. Today, we're focusing primarily on childcare centers, but if you're a family childcare business owner listening in today, the information is also useful for you. So you'll have to think about, for your childcare business, what do you actually need, and how do the conditions and terms of each of these funding sources fit or not fit with what you're able to comply with. Think about how you apply for them. You can apply for either of these funding sources and turn it down or accept a reduced amount if circumstances change in the coming months. Whoops, I apologize. There is a slight issue with the presentation on my end. So we'll just move right into the economic injury disaster loans. So the EIDL, as we'll call it throughout today's presentation, is a program that has existed before COVID-19. It's helped small businesses where you live and perhaps your own business recover from primarily weather-related disasters. In this case, the disaster that the federal government has declared is the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is intended to cover a wide array of working capital needs. So there are many ways that you can use EIDL funding, and we encourage you to look through the Small Business Administration website to see all the various ways you can apply EIDL funding to your childcare business. As part of the first round of EIDL funding for businesses to support them throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a program called the EIDL Advance. This provided a grant. So within this traditional loan, there was a grant portion, which may be of great interest to your childcare business because you don't have to pay that grant back. As you know, things in 2020 and 2021 change rapidly. So we're talking to you today on January 19th. More information is expected to come out soon about whether or not and how the EIDL Advance program might work this time around. So as Heidi pointed out in the beginning of the presentation, you'll want to consider eligibility before you sit down and gather documents and spend some of your valuable time as a childcare business owner or director figuring out if you're going to apply for these funding sources. You want to just figure out if your program is eligible for either of these funding sources. So if your business is owned by a U.S. citizen or a non-citizen qualified alien owns 20% or more of the business, and your business is located in the U.S. or a designated territory, and any of these other conditions apply, you can pursue this funding source. So as we mentioned, EIDL is a loan. So a loan is someone or something advancing you money to cover a need that you have immediately, and then you paying it back over time. Your business's eligibility and loan quote will depend on your credit history, your ability to repay it, and there will be certain circumstances that need to be met depending on the size of the EIDL loan that you'd like to take out. So an important thing to know for the EIDL loan is that rather than going to your neighborhood bank or an office within your state or your CCR&R contact, you're applying for the EIDL loan right through the Small Business Administration website. It's a federal government website, and you apply online and submit your application online. However, before you sit down to start that application, we recommend that you gather the following documents and any others that you think might be applicable to your childcare business. You'll want to have your computer, a great internet connection, various tax documents, various expense documents, a social security or an EIN number, and bank account number for the bank accounts affiliated with your childcare business. So, like a progress bar, you'll see this slide as we get to each new section of the application. We'll go through this quickly because this information will be available after this presentation, and we know that you'll be able to use it at your own pace when the time is right for you. So you'll sit down at your computer, you'll open the application, and you'll select which entity are you. You know which one of these fits your company, your childcare business best, so you'll select the one that's closest to your business. You'll then want to review and agree to the conditions and terms of the EIDL. If you're unable to agree to these terms, you won't be considered eligible, and you could just close that application and consider another funding source. So then you'll enter in your business information. You want to enter in your business legal name. Childcare businesses may have a legal name, and then there may be a name that parents or families use for your childcare business. So you want to look on your tax documents. If you don't have this in hand, you'll want to search your Secretary of State's website to confirm your business legal name. You may have a trade name. You can enter that at this time in the application, and if you don't, you just leave that blank. Or your social security number if you're a sole proprietor. You'll then list your organization type. As with any of the federal or potential state funding streams, which may be available to childcare businesses in 2021, you'll want to know your organization type. How are you incorporated? What type of business are you? If you're a nonprofit or a franchise, you'll also answer those questions accordingly in this section of the application. You'll then be asked for some financial information. You'll want to enter in your gross revenue for 12 months prior to the date that COVID-19 was declared a disaster. The federal government in the United States has said that January 31st, 2020, so almost a year ago today, is the date that COVID-19 was declared a disaster. The application will then ask you about a cost of goods. We spoke with the Small Business Administration, and it's likely that as a childcare business, you would not have a cost of goods sold. You're providing a service, you're not selling items. So if you don't have a cost of goods sold, you would just leave this blank. If you have rental properties associated with your childcare business and you've lost rent due to the pandemic, you'd enter that information in this section of the application. If your childcare business is a nonprofit entity, you'd enter in your cost of operations from the dates listed here. And if you don't have that information, completing a profit and loss statement can assist with determining this amount. But we'd also like to note that if you don't have this financial information readily available, there's probably some prep work that needs to go into applying for any of these financial resources. If your childcare business received any other funding as a result of the COVID-19 disaster, I can see from the chat that people have been asking about second draw PPP loans or how state funding might interact with this federal funding information. You will want to enter that here and you want to have that information at the ready. We can't emphasize this very basic slide enough. Double check, triple check, quadruple check your contact information. The SBA may contact you about your EIDL loan via your phone, physical mail, or email. You want that information entered in correctly because a lack of response may make your EIDL loan be considered ineligible. You want to list the date that your business was established. If you were not the person who started the business, you'll want to include the information here about when you took over ownership. The business activity is the next part of the EIDL loan application. There will be several menus. You'll select educational services as your business activity, and then there'll be a very detailed drop-down menu, and you'll select daycare as your detailed business activity. These are designations categorized by the federal government. You'll just want to follow those that procedure. So number of employees, you'll want to list the number of employees you had on this date. Not today, not yesterday, not a few weeks ago, January 31st, 2020, and be sure to include yourself if you're an employee of the childcare business. So then you'll be asked some business owner information. Are you the owner? If there's another owner, and if there are multiple owners, the percentage. Just getting back to the right slide there. So after you've entered the ownership information, you'll be asked some additional information. There'll be questions, 3 questions you'll want to answer yes or no to. And if you received any assistance in completing the EIDL application, you'll want to provide that information. Once you've submitted an EIDL loan application for your childcare business, you may be contacted by an SBA loan officer. Again, they may contact you via phone, email, or physical mail. So you'll want to monitor all of those channels. And they may ask you for additional tax information or personal financial information. They're doing that because they're really running a review of the application that you submitted, and you'll want to have this information available as well, so that as soon as they ask, you can turn it over. We spoke at length with a regional SBA office, and we just wanted to hear from them. What should childcare business owners know about emails regarding the EIDL loan will come from an address with ending in this at sba.gov. Unfortunately, you want to be aware of fraud, and so make sure that you're reading and rereading emails that you receive regarding an EIDL loan. And check your voicemail and check your physical mail wherever your business receives that mail. So our last notes on the EIDL before we turn our attention to the PPP is that if you're approved for an EIDL loan, you can change the loan amount or deny the loan if circumstances change for your business. When you submit the application, you may be in one situation, and when you hear back from SBA, you may be in an entirely different situation. And as a childcare business owner, you make the best decisions for your business. If you are really hoping to obtain an EIDL loan and you're not approved, it's not the end. Everything's not lost. You can request a consideration, and then you can also review all the information and make sure it's accurate. Perhaps you weren't turned down because entity. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Ann McSweeney, who will present information on the Payroll Protection Program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ann McSweeney. I'm going to be talking with you for a few minutes about the PPP. We'll cover what the program is, how it's changed, and then we'll go through again step-by-step how to apply. It is going to be a lot of information over the next 20 minutes. So again, this is recorded. You will be able to review this video in a couple days once it's posted online. So the PPP is a federally funded forgivable loan program. Unlike EIDL, it is administered by banks. You can apply directly with a bank rather than going to the SBA website. And it is forgivable, meaning if you meet certain requirements, you will not have to pay this loan back. PPP is all about maintaining payroll. So the amount of loan that you receive is going to be based off of the size of your payroll. And you'll be eligible for forgiveness based off of using the loan towards your eligible payroll costs. At least 60% of the money you receive must be used towards eligible payroll costs, with the remaining 40% or smaller used for eligible business expenses in order to receive forgiveness. So no matter what bank you go to for the PPP, it is fundamentally the same program and will have the same terms. We just want to make you aware that banks all over the country are interpreting SBA regulations. They also have their own policies. So your experience accessing the PPP might be slightly different depending on which bank you use. And for that reason, we really encourage you to ask specific questions about the PPP and how it will work in your business to your lender directly. Unlike the EIDL, the SBA will not contact you about your PPP. So if you get a call or an email from the SBA about, or someone claiming to be from the SBA about your PPP loan, that is a scam, and you should check with your banker or your lender for official information. The applications for this round of PPP are due at the end of March, but we encourage you to apply before then if you're interested in the program. This is a visual of how the PPP works. So you're going to apply with your bank, and the money will be deposited into your account. Once that money is deposited, it sets up a period in which you're going to use the PPP funds to cover your business expenses. And you can choose anywhere from an 8 to 24 week period where you'll be applying PPP funds to your business expenses. Once that period where you're using the funds is over, you have an additional 10 months to apply for forgiveness. We really want childcare businesses to be tracking expenses, talking to their banker, doing everything you can to make sure you're on track for full forgiveness of this money. However, I think it's important to know that partial forgiveness is available. So if at the end of your period, at the end of that 24 weeks, you realize that for whatever reason, you used 50% or 55% of that loan towards eligible costs on your payroll, you would get partial forgiveness proportional to the amount that you had used the loan towards your payroll. It is not all or nothing. If at the end of 10 months, you have not applied for forgiveness at all, then the entirety of your loan would transition into a repayment period. You'd be charged a 1% interest and be in charge of paying that off over a 5-year period. Again, we don't recommend this, but just, I think, helpful to understand all the different scenarios for using this loan program. So the PPP has changed a lot since it was first introduced last spring. That 60% threshold of the costs you need to allocate towards your payroll has declined a little bit to 60%. And there are some additional things that you can cover with PPP loans. Some eligible costs that we think are going to be particularly of interest to childcare businesses include PPE, as well as food expenses. In this round, billions of dollars have been set aside to various types of small businesses designed to increase access to the program. There's nothing special you need to do to access this set aside money, no additional application. We just wanted you to know that billions of dollars have been set aside to small businesses in categories that may apply to you as a way to expand access to this program. Streamlined forgiveness is something that the SBA has been rolling out. There is currently a long form of the forgiveness paperwork, which is 11 pages long. For borrowers of under $50,000 through the PPP program, there is a 1.5 page, very simple certification that you would use. And coming any day now from the SBA is going to be a simplified form for those borrowers up to $150,000. And that's going to cover almost all childcare businesses. So this is a great reason to sign up for notifications on the SBA website and know when that form is released. Read it, review it, and make sure throughout the use period where you're applying PPP to your business expenses, you're looking at that form, you're knowing what you're going to have to fill out when it comes time for forgiveness. A big area where there was a lot of questions when PPP first came out was, what is the implication going to be for my taxes? And this has been made very clear. So PPP, including the forgiven portion, is not going to show up as income on your personal or business taxes. And you can go ahead and deduct business expenses in your annual tax return, even if you used PPP to pay for those expenses. So that really simplifies things, at least at the federal level. Be sure to check with your state regulations to see if they align with that. But on the federal level, the tax implications are very simple. So some brief notes on eligibility. One thing we want to make sure that childcare businesses know is that there is no minimum credit score needed to apply for PPP. Your bank may run a credit check and may have their own policies about this. So if this is a concern for you, ask your bank. There are, similar to EIDL, some requirements about U.S. citizenship or employing U.S. citizens, some limitations around recent felony records. You must have been in business in mid-February 2020, and you can't be out of business currently to apply for PPP. We know a lot of childcare businesses have opened and closed throughout the last year. You can go ahead and apply to PPP if you are currently closed. But just remember that PPP is designed to help you maintain an active payroll. So if you don't think you're going to have an active payroll over the next coming months, PPP might not be the program for you. And you need to be a small business, which in this case is defined as under 500 employees if you're a first-time borrower with PPP, and under 300 employees if you are a second-time borrower. That brings us to another major change in PPP, which is that you are allowed to apply for it again, even if you received a PPP in 2020. You're going to be defined as a second draw applicant. You'll have a separate application form. You have to have under 300 employees, and you're going to need to demonstrate that you need a second PPP loan by showing a loss in gross receipts, and we'll walk through how you do that in just a second. All right, so now we're going to talk specifically about how you apply to the PPP program. The one thing to know is that not all banks and financial institutions will be offering PPP. All different types will, from local to national banks, online banks, all different types of banks offer PPP, but not every single one will. And some banks are going to require that you were a current customer prior to PPP in order to be able to apply with them, but not all will. So check with your own banks, the ones you have relationships with now. But if those aren't the right fit for you, you can find a lender that's participating using these two tools on the SBA website. One is just a list of banks participating by state, and one has a matching function. So those are both very helpful tools. Here are some of the documents you're going to want to gather before starting your application. And Your bank, again, may ask for some additional documentation. So don't be thrown off as you go through the application or following the application, your bank asks for some more information. But these are good things to have on hand as you begin the application process. So I think most childcare business owners have that folder of really important paperwork from when you first incorporated or purchased the business. And these are just some ideas. If you don't have that information readily available, you can go to your Secretary of State website where you first incorporated. Usually that's where you're operating right now, and use their searchable online database. You can find a list of every state's Secretary of State website on irs.gov. And navigating through the federal government website, you can just be sure that you're on official state websites the whole time you're searching for that information. You can also find all of the business information you'll need on your corporate tax returns, and we'll walk through where to look for those as we go through the application form. So if you don't have that information readily available, these are some additional places you can find that information. Here is a consideration that we just ask childcare businesses to think about if you have experienced a dramatic change in your business, as we know so many childcare businesses have over the course of the pandemic. New to this round of 2021 PPP, you can use your 2019 tax information, or you can use draft 2020 information. And the information that you provide about your payroll is going to be what determines the size of your loan. So if you use 2019 information and your business is substantially smaller than it was in 2019, that is fine, but you may receive a loan that you just want to make sure that you have the current payroll costs, or you're going to hire additional people in order to meet that 60% threshold with your current payroll costs. You can also use draft 2020 numbers. You can use 2019 numbers and return a portion of that money, or you can just plan for partial forgiveness if that's right for you. This isn't a question of anything being right or wrong. It's just something to be aware of, that your choice to use 2019 or 2020 numbers is going to make a big impact on the amount of money you get. We want to make sure you're thinking about this and set up for full forgiveness if that's what you want. Okay, we're going to walk through the different fields of the SBA application. And as I said, you're going to be applying with your bank. So some banks are going to ask you to fill this out as a paper form. Some will have it as a fillable form, and other banks will have their own portal that may look completely different than this, but they are going to be asking you the same information, and knowing the answers to these questions is going to set you up for success, even if it looks totally different. So just be aware that it might look really different as you go to apply. This SBA form is available in Spanish for those who wish to fill it out in Spanish. So I'm going to go through some of these fields really quickly because they are the same as the EIDL. You're going to fill out whether you're a corporation, LLC, sole proprietor. If you aren't sure about that, you can look on the Secretary of State website or review your tax returns to see how the federal government is treating your business entity. Again, you're going to fill out the legal name and address. That might not be your street address. Use what's on your official documentation or in that database if there's any difference between your street address and what is showing up there, or the legal name of your business. DBA, doing business as, again, include your marketing name if you have one, and it is perfectly fine to leave this blank if you do not have both a legal name and a marketing name or trade name. Your NAICS code is going to be 624410. That's the case for a wide range of childcare businesses, but you can look that up on NAICS.com or find it on your tax return if you want to double check that number. Your year of establishment, again, is going to be found in that Secretary of State database or in your incorporation paperwork. In the next field, you're just going to be certifying that you meet the qualifications as a small business. Almost all childcare businesses are going to want to check that first box that you have under 500 or 300 employees if you are a second draw applicant. There are some additional size standards based off of revenue and business valuation. If you have more employees than that, you can use those and see if you qualify through those additional size standards. Childcare businesses, the vast majority will have an EIN, that's an employee identification number. You can find that on the top right corner of your tax return and on a number of different forms. One thing, just as a note of caution, unless you're very sure that you operate as a sole proprietor, meaning that you don't have a legal entity and you run your childcare business in your name,
put the EIN rather than your social security number. You want to tie the loan to your business and not to your person. And just as Molly said, that contact information, really make sure you get it correct. You do not want to miss out on the PPP opportunity just because of a misspelled email. Okay, now we're going to get into some of the calculations required for this form. And this is where you can choose to use your 2019 or your 2020 numbers, but you're going to want to be consistent. The way you're asked to come up with this calculation is to determine your total annual eligible payroll costs, divide it by 12 to get the average. If anyone in your business makes over $100,000 as a wage or lives primarily outside of the US, you're going to have to do some additional calculations to subtract out some of those costs. You can include, in addition to the wages you provide, paid leave like paid vacation, sick leave, severance leave, any health insurance, dental or vision costs that you cover, and retirement contributions. In that annual total, you do not want to include the taxes you pay, the payroll taxes that you pay for your employees. And you don't want to include 1099 contractor costs because 1099 contractors can fill out their own PPP forms. And just as a note that, we all categorize our business expenses slightly differently. This might not include everything that you put into a staffing category. Things like background checks or training would not be covered here. If you are using 2020 as the year you're using to calculate your costs, this is something to be really careful about. Leave that was covered by the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, or FCRA, cannot be included in this calculation because there's a separate tax credit program that covers those costs. So this is not something you need to worry if you're using 2019 to determine this average, but it is something to think about if you are using 2020 costs to determine your average monthly payroll. So here's just a really simple example. This center came up with $300,000 as their total annual payroll costs. They divided it by 12 to get their average monthly costs. And then as the form is going to instruct you, you multiply that by 2.5 to get your total request number. If you took out an EIDL loan in 2020, you have an opportunity to refinance that through this PPP application. You only want to include the amount that is outstanding of your loan. You aren't going to include your EIDL advance here. But in this case, the center had a $50,000 outstanding EIDL loan. They're able to wrap that into their PPP loan. This at minimum means that you will have a lower interest rate, that 1% interest rate with the PPP instead of the 3.75 with EIDL. I've heard some conflicting things about the opportunity to get forgiveness on this money. And there is going to be some additional information forthcoming about refinancing EIDL. So if this applies to you, definitely sign up for SBA updates and see if that is potentially forgiven if you include this in your PPP refinancing. Okay, the final field of this section is just your number of employees. And again, you aren't going to want to include contractors, the 1099 employees, or volunteers, but do include part-time staff. The next section of the loan is you're going to want to check off all of the different ways that you're going to use this loan. You can select all of them. You're definitely going to want to check payroll costs because you're going to be using 60% of this loan to cover your payroll. The one allowable expense I just want to flag is covered property damage. Unlike the other new categories, which are very broad and include a lot of things, covered property damage is very specific to property damage or vandalism related to public disturbances in 2020 that were not covered by insurance. So only check that one box if that applies to you, and you can leave it blank if it doesn't. Okay, so here now we just want to double check we have the right form. If you're a second draw PPP applicant, you're going to need to provide some additional information here. You'll want to include the loan number from your first PPP, and then you want to demonstrate a loss in gross receipts in 2020 compared to 2019. You can do this quarterly or annually. It's probably easier to do it quarterly if you have quarterly financial information available. One thing to note is that you do not have to fill out these fields if you are asking for less than $150,000. However,
you want to make sure that you are eligible for the second draw program. So we encourage you to do this math, even if you don't have to put any numbers in these fields. We encourage you to do this math now, just to have that confidence, that peace of mind that you are eligible for this program and not find that out when you go to apply for forgiveness. Okay, so I'm going to cover this really at a very high level, but this is where I would encourage pausing if you're listening to a recording or taking a screenshot. You're going to be comparing for this calculation, if you're a second draw applicant, you're going to be comparing gross receipts. That's your profit, apologies. That's your revenue, excluding expenses. It's not necessarily your profit. You can find this on Form 1120 of your corporate tax return. Line 1C is what you're going to want to be looking at. These next examples will walk you through how to handle it if you were closed for portions of 2019, or you may only find that 25% loss for one quarter and not another. That's fine, as long as you can find that loss in at least one quarter, then you're eligible for this second draw program. So take a screenshot. I'm not going to talk through these in any greater depth than that, but we hope these are helpful to those for whom this applies. Okay, rounding out the end of the application, you're going to be asked a few yes or no questions. Don't worry, only a couple of these are disqualifying. The others, you'll just have to provide additional information to your bank. And just don't forget, there are 2 questions there that you have to initial. That's an easy way to miss something on the application, so just make sure you initial 5 and 6. The next section, you're going to include your owner information for anyone that owns at least 20% of the business. This does not have to add up to 100% if you have some folks who own just a small portion of your business. And if you're a nonprofit and you don't technically have owners, don't let this trip you up. You're just going to put your authorized signatories, and you might be asked for some additional information by your bank. You'll read these 10 statements and initial them. It just walks you through making sure that you understand what the loan is for, the allowable uses, the basic terms for forgiveness, that you're not going to commit fraud. So just read those and initial, and then you'll sign your application, and you are pretty much done. There is 1 page of optional demographic information that you can provide. We encourage you to provide this information if you're comfortable doing so. So as I mentioned earlier, forgiveness is in a little bit of a state of change. So you want to keep an eye out for that simplified application for forgiveness for the borrowers up to $150,000. Take a look now at Form 3508. That is the full forgiveness form. And then there's also a 3508S. That is the simplified forgiveness form for the borrowers who have taken a loan smaller than $50,000. That will give you a sense of this type of information you're going to need to provide your bank when it comes time for forgiveness. And even though these processes are getting a lot simpler and you're just going to need to certify that you used it for allowable costs, we do encourage you to keep careful records of how you use the PPP funding for that 8 to 24 week period, so that that's available if your bank or the SBA asks for it. You'll submit your forgiveness paperwork to the lender that you applied with. And we encourage you to be in touch with them from the start about any specific questions about which expenses qualify as eligible business expenses or payroll expenses. Your bank is going to be the one that's signing off on that full forgiveness form. You want to make sure you're on the same page with them. All right. And just a final note about the employee retention credit. When PPP was first introduced, you had to choose whether you wanted to use PPP or the ERC. You can now use both, and you can apply for ERC retroactively to 2020, or you can apply it to the first 2 quarters of 2021. This is a powerful refundable credit, meaning you can get money back even if you don't owe any taxes. Designed to help you cover your payroll as well. It can't be used for that exact same period of 8 to 24 weeks that you're using PPP for, but it is a really important source of funding to think about, having some additional financing for your payroll for the other portion of the first 2 quarters of 2021, as well as the ability to look backwards into 2020. So talk to your accountant and explore using both of these programs. All right. That was a lot, but thank you so much for sticking with me, and I hope you feel a lot more confident about the decision whether or not to apply for PPP. Molly, if you could take it away.
Thanks, Anne. I am going to share just a few more takeaways as you consider which federal funding opportunities might be right for your childcare business. And I would love to call on my colleague Anne to advance those slides if possible. Thanks, and we can go to the next one. So there's a few takeaways. Oh, one back that First Children's Finance wants to make sure that you're aware of. So if you decide that either the EIDL or the PPP or both are right for your childcare business, only apply once. You don't want to submit multiple applications and confuse the lender or that is trying to process those applications. As we've said many times, monitor your email, voicemail, and physical mail. Some government institutions will only contact you via physical mail, a letter in your mailbox. That is not true with these applications. You can be contacted in a variety of ways, so you want to be responsive. So from December 22nd to January 19th, things have shifted and changed quite a bit with the new legislation, and more guidance and information is coming out every day. So make sure to sign up for the SBA newsletter. When you go to sign up for their newsletter, you'll be prompted to enter the zip code. I would enter the zip code of my childcare business, and you'll receive regional information, the contacts for your regional SBA office, as well as new information as it becomes available. There are new fraud prevention measures in place for the review of the applications, so it may cause a slower review process this time around. If you were a childcare business owner who applied for and received a PPP loan a few months ago, just be aware that it may be a slower turnaround time this time around. No matter what you apply for, you will want to be your own advocate. If you're applying for a PPP loan, be in constant contact with that financial institution until you receive confirmation that your PPP loan has been successfully submitted. Don't be afraid to be a cheerleader for your own business. This funding is for small businesses across the country that have received some kind of financial harm due to the COVID-19 pandemic. You are a small business owner. Make sure that if either or both of these loans are right for you, you're pursuing them. And then lastly, we want you to be aware of any state grants and how they might impact your operating costs and your future funding opportunities. If your state released a fund or a grant that you applied for and received related to the COVID-19 pandemic, you'll want to be in contact with whichever agency in your state administered that grant or that funding opportunity, so you can understand how all of these various financial resources might interact with each other and might impact taxes, etc. And of course, keep copies of all your materials so that if anything should be lost, or if there's a new round of funding and you need all the same documents again, you've already got them compiled. The last note from First Children's Finance today is that there will be forthcoming overviews of the EIDL and PP funding opportunities. There are many institutions that are releasing these one-pagers. First Children's Finance, with our decades of experience working on the business and finance side of childcare, is releasing childcare-specific overviews, and these are specifically for childcare centers, and we know that forthcoming overviews for family childcare business owners will be helpful for those entities. We also want you to know that there are many federal opportunities to support your childcare business. We presented on the PPP and the EIDL today, but Anne briefly presented on the employee retention credits. There may be new federal funding through the State Department of Childcare, Early Learning, Education, Health and Human Services, whatever it might be called in your state, that you'll want to be aware of. And if your state decides to release funding to childcare businesses, it's likely that some or all of the same financial information, tax information, corporate structure information will be asked. So once you've submitted an EIDL or a PPP application, if you decide to do that, don't put all those documents away. Keep them on your desk or where you can easily reach them, because it may be that you'll need to enter in the same information again. We know that you are providing critical critical resource to your community and to the country, and you have a lot going on. So just make that one step easier. Keep all of that financial information in one place so you can access it for whatever applications you may pursue. I'm going to turn it over to Patty Ryan, who will mention a few notes, and then I believe there'll be a Q&A. Patty?
Thanks so much, Molly. Yeah, just a couple things that I want to make sure people are aware of. Yes, you will have access to the recording and to the PowerPoint and to additional resources. How soon it will be posted? As soon as we can get the recording to First Children's Finance, it will be posted on their website. It might take a day or so before it becomes posted on our website, but we'll make it available just as soon as we can so that you have the information. And again, we want to recognize all of you and how busy you are. We know this was a lot of information, but as Shannon said at the beginning, we do hope that you investigate and take advantage of the resources available to you. We are going to now do some questions and answers. And Molly, Heidi, and Ann, I know that you've hopefully been monitoring both in the presenter chat and then as well as in the question and answer and the other chat. But a couple questions bubbled up that I wondered if you might address before we dive into some others. And one is, I think we forgot to tell people when the EIDL and PPP become available. So
Hey, Patty, this is Heidi. I'll start there. The EIDL application is available currently. The PPP loans had an advance date for community development financial institutions who are actively taking applications, and banks are about to launch if they have not already. I didn't look at the websites this morning before we joined our call, but Anne, I'll let you add if there's anything that you need to correct that I just said.
Nope, that is correct. Thank you. And do submit your application as soon as possible. The deadline is the end of March. It's possible the funding would run out before then, so we encourage you to apply as soon as you can.
Great. And there were a number of, oh, sorry, Heidi, go ahead.
I'll just say one more thing is remember back in the slides, there is a list by state where you can go and find all the participating lenders. And so definitely look for any CDFIs and any lenders who have already been identified in your state. That's the easiest way to figure out who is lending, and you can go directly to their websites to find additional information about their individual application processes and criteria.
And should you submit multiple applications to multiple lenders?
I think that Molly just said this, but that was a great question to ask again. Remember that the EIDL and the Payroll Protection Program are two different programs. I would submit an application for each if you think that they are appropriate for your business and a good fit for you to take on additional debt. But if you are talking about can you submit multiple applications for PPP, we would advise you not to do so. It can be very confusing for the lender. So I would encourage you to choose one lender and one application process.
Thank you. A number of participants either opened a business, acquired a business, or assumed the business from somebody else during the pandemic. How does that impact their eligibility for either of these programs?
That is an excellent question. And I think that is one that we are going to follow up with. Everyone who participates in this webinar will get access to a follow-up round of questions that are written. And I think we want to make sure that we have really clear guidance. And so we are going to issue a formal answer to that after this webinar. There are lots of complexities here. And I saw a couple of questions about whether they can apply it for the PPP for that acquired business, and then the complexity of whether or not that acquired business had a first round of PPP. So there's a couple of factors here that we want to clarify. We will do so in writing following this webinar.
Great. And there were a number of questions as Molly was talking about the EIDL, about the credit score. Molly, can you talk just a little bit more about that? Does your credit score have to be a certain number? And is it your personal credit score, your business credit score? Those were some of the questions.
Thanks, Patty. As Heidi just mentioned, we have both an FAQ and a one-pager on the EIDL and a one-pager on the PPP loan that are coming out after this webinar. We wanted to make sure that the information presented applied to all businesses and not just one or the other. So you can expect to receive that information after the session today.
Great. Thanks so much. Molly, you mentioned about the SBA actually calling, and Anne, you said if folks receive a call about the PPP, likely it's a scam. Can you tell people, Molly, how they'll know if it's an authentic call from the SBA that they might receive and know that it's not a scam?
Oh, that's such a great question, Patty, and I'm happy to share that. So the person should identify themselves as a loan officer from SBA. If you have any questions or concerns about the call that you So I'll start over because I think I just froze. If you have any concerns or questions about the call that you're receiving, make sure to get their contact information, tell them you'll call them back, and call your regional SBA office. And they can confirm for you whether person, first name, last name is an questions or not. You should not share financial information with anyone who you feel like might not be a true representative of the SBA. We emphasize the various ways that SBA will contact you because we know that the IRS, for example, only contacts you through written mail. And so people might be used to just receiving written mail from the federal government. That doesn't apply here. They might call you, they might email you, check your spam folder, check your voicemail, and check your PO box or your mailbox, wherever you receive mail regularly. Anne, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Nope, I think that covered it. And again, just if they are reaching out to you about the PPP and claiming to be from the SBA, that is when you would want to not answer any of their questions and talk to your lender about the PPP. So just want to make sure that there is not confusion about the two different programs. The SBA will only not contact you about the PPP. They will contact you about EIDL.
Great, thanks. And does somebody want to explain a little bit more about a CDFI?
I'd be happy to. CDFIs is an acronym that stands for Community Development Financial Institutions. They operate loan funds in your community. They may not look like a Main Street bank, but they are a financial institution. It's a designation by the U.S. Department of Treasury. They do provide loans and lending activity, but they typically are established to serve underserved markets. So there are CDFIs who may serve a cultural group, they may serve a regional geography, or they may serve a specific kind of borrower. For instance, First Children's Finance provides lending services to child care centers and family child care. We are not providing PPP loans, so let me just clarify. We are not participating as a CDFI in the PPP lending program, but there are many of them in your community. You can find them in the SBA listing in your state of who is providing PPP loans, and they are an excellent source of financing. They may have extra technical assistance available to you in your state. And there is a directory of CDFIs that is available nationally that we can provide a link to following this webinar as well.
Thanks, Heidi. Patty, if I could add something. One of the things that First Children's Finance observed over the first few months of the PPP existing as a financial resource for small businesses was that many childcare businesses who did decide to submit an application were submitting through extremely large financial institutions. Now, this is a generalization. This isn't true in every case. But if you're submitting through a very large financial institution, it might just be a little bit of a longer process to actually track down a person to answer your questions. If something is unclear, et cetera, for the PPP loan. A CDFI is generally a smaller financial institution. It might be more regional, geographically based to where you are. And so it might be a little bit easier to actually be in contact with a person who works for the CDFI or a regional bank about any questions you may have about your loan. Again, generalization, not true, but often we hear that childcare businesses or business owners are unbanked, meaning they don't have a relationship with a financial institution. And sometimes that is true, but what some institutions learned throughout the first round of PPP funding was that some childcare businesses are banking exclusively with very large national or international financial institutions. And in that case, it might just be a longer wait for customer service and or to get a financial question answered. So a CDFI is one option, but there are many options. And if you're happy with your large financial institution and they're releasing a PPP loan process, by all means, go ahead and go through with that one. Patty, I've seen in the chat a few times that people are asking for that list of where to find a financial institution in your state that's issuing PPP loans. So I just want to make sure that people know how and where to get access to this information once this session is done today.
Okay, and Molly, additionally, a couple people have wondered about the SBA news. That's included here, but can you talk a little bit more about how they'll sign up for that as well?
Absolutely. So they can go to their the SBA.gov website. That's a federal website. There are many attention-grabbing headlines and text boxes all over the website asking you to sign up for SBA newsletters. So you'll want to click on one of those. You'll enter in your contact information and make sure to enter in the zip code where your childcare business or businesses are located, because they'll release the regionally customized, curated information for small businesses in your area, and or they may include some staff information for you to reach out to directly to an SBA staff member with EIDL loan questions specifically.
Great, thank you so much. And if folks have additional questions, please feel free to type them in the question box and we'll see if we can answer them. I also want to make sure that everybody knows you don't have to put your email into the chat box. We'll make sure that everybody gets access to the PowerPoint and the link to the recording just as soon as we can. And as Molly and Heidi and Ann both said, that there's support available. Tom Copeland has joined us on this call as well. He'll be facilitating a webinar specifically for family child care providers on Saturday. We'll make sure that everybody has the links to be able to sign up to that. And again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in, and if we can, we'll answer them now. If not, we'll make the the information available to you. And Molly, there have been a couple questions about folks and what they consider their fiscal year, and wonder if that has any impact on what they're able to apply for and how to apply. If one of you would like to address that.
And if you're able to talk, I've seen that the same question repeated a few times about using one quarter to the next in various years. Could you just review what financial information from one year to the next childcare business owners will want to have if they pursue a PPP loan?
Sure. So I can speak to some of that. You are able to use, in addition to being able to use 2019 or 2020, you can include up to the time that you're receiving the loan. So if you were applying for PPP in March of this year, you could look at that year ending in March compared to the prior year. I saw some of those questions about the loss in gross receipts over the different quarters. Yes, you do only need to show it in one quarter, not all of your quarters. You do have the option of doing an annual comparison instead of a quarterly comparison. So comparing 2019 to 2020, that's going to require you to have more completed 2020 tax information than I think most people do. So that's one reason we focused on the quarters, assuming that that might be easier for you. I think that's as specific as I want to get right now, but we can provide some additional information about the quarterly comparison in the FAQ.
I would just add that the federal government is pretty clear about the quarters that they are referencing in the requirements. So you may have a different financial fiscal year. You need to do the calculations based on what the federal government's fiscal year is. So when they identify a quarter, imagine that those are the quarters they are referencing. So you'll want to make sure that no matter what fiscal year you are on, you are looking at the requirements put forward by the federal government.
Thanks, Heidi. I've noticed a number of questions about forgiveness. So speaking about the federal government and guidance from them, let's stay on that theme for a moment. I've seen several questions in the chat about, will the EIDL be forgiven, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan? And when the slides become available, we have a really nice table, as does actually the Small Business Administration on their COVID-19 relief page, that shows the differences between the EIDL and the PPP. The EIDL is a loan that is not forgiven. The terms are available for you to see what repayment would look like. There are portions of the PPP which can be forgiven based on how that funding is used. So there are many questions related to forgiveness about the EIDL. That's a loan. It's not forgiven at this time. And then there were a number of questions. Sorry, I froze, but I could tell there were a number. There are a number of questions about when you would need to submit forgiveness for the PPP funding your childcare business may have received. You want to be in contact with the financial institution you submitted that PPP loan through to ask questions and to make sure you're tracking everything you need to for forgiveness. Thanks for letting me interrupt with a little more information. Patty, go ahead.
I apologize. Could somebody just also clarify about an EIN, when it would be appropriate to use a social security number, an EIN, et cetera? There have been a number of questions around that, and wonder if you could just re-clarify that, please.
I'll just remind folks at this point in time that we are focused specifically around childcare centers in this particular webinar. So if you are a family child care provider or business owner who is reflecting on that question, I'm going to point you to Saturday's webinar with Tom Copeland. But if you are a child care center and wondering about whether or not you should use your social security number or your EIN, it's going to depend specifically about how you are incorporated in your business structure. And I'm guessing that child care centers most likely have an EIN. Anne, would you reflect anything different as you think about that question?
Nope, that was
She
perfect.
says
Thank you so
nope.
much, Heidi.
Thank you so much. Okay, it looks like the questions in the chat and in the Q&A are slowing down. So we'll just pause for a second and see if anybody else has some additional questions. And I know that you've covered this. I wonder if you might just say it again. Would you say again where folks apply for the EIDL and where folks apply for the PPP, please?
The EIDL, the EIDL loan, is a loan directly from the SBA. So you'll go to the SBA's website to apply directly for that loan. The PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, is going to be a loan that can be partially forgiven or completely forgiven if you meet the requirement. And that is going to be issued by either a bank or a CDFI. You can look on your state's SBA homepage for a list of participating lenders, or if you already have a banking relationship, you could go to the website of that financial institution, and most often it is right on the homepage right now, whether or not they are accepting applications or entrance into the portal of how they are going to accept applications.
Thank you so much. And can you just talk a little bit about forgiveness again and what will be forgiven? Could
Certainly.
be
So,
forgiven.
sure. I'm going to reflect back to Anne in just a moment here, but remember that only the PPP loan has forgiveness attached to it. And before I hand it over to Anne to get to the specifics about the breakdown of that, remember that it is designed to support payroll. And so that is where the bulk of the forgiveness is there. And I just want to note that if you received a payroll protection program loan in the first round of spring or summer of 2020 and you have not applied for forgiveness yet, you still want to make sure that you do that. And then, Anne, I'm going to let you talk about the breakdown and criteria of eligible expenses.
Yes, absolutely. So the breakdown for forgiveness, you're going to need to demonstrate and certify that you used 60% of the funds you received through the PPP towards those eligible payroll costs, and then the remaining funding towards the additional other eligible business expenses. And those business expenses, that category has increased dramatically with this round of PPP funding. So it used to just be rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. Now it's a whole range of costs, including your PPE, your food costs, software costs. A lot of operating expenses can now be included in that additional percent. So childcare businesses are businesses that we know have high payroll costs generally. And we feel confident that a childcare business should be able to achieve full forgiveness as long as you're just, being conscientious and tracking your expenses, meeting that 60% threshold shouldn't be a big issue.
I'm just going to add, because I can see lots of questions coming up about this in the chat. If you received an EIDL loan in the spring or summer of 2020 and thought that it would be forgiven or we're expecting forgiveness, EIDL does not have a forgiveness aspect to it. It is a loan that has to be repaid at 3.75% interest rate. However, in this current round, there is an opportunity. You'll want to go back to the slides where Ann discussed this. If you would like to refinance that EIDL loan into a PPP loan for the 1% interest rate, that is an option. So I can see lots of people asking questions about EIDL repayment. There is not a forgiveness option in EIDL for the loan portion. We're not talking about the advance that you might have gotten in 2020, but the loan. But there is an option to refinance in the PPP loan in 2021.
Thanks, Heidi. And in addition to the acquisition questions, also we received a question about somebody who's interested in selling the business. Will you be including that information also in the FAQs, or is there something you'd like to say about that now?
I'm not sure that I saw the context of that question. So given that we're running out of time, I think we'll review the question and formulate a formal written answer.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. Okay, again, I want to reiterate that the PowerPoint and the recording will be made available at First Children's Finance website just as soon as we can possibly get it up there. All of the folks who attended this webinar today and this presentation today will also receive a link to the recording and the PowerPoint just as soon as we can make it available. We're also working very diligently to get you, as Heidi just mentioned, the FAQs and additional resources that will be available to help you understand and provide you an avenue for access to some of these very helpful resources for child care centers. I will post also in the chat, again, the link to the Family Child Care webinar that's upcoming on Saturday. If for some reason you don't get that, you can again just reach out to us and we'll make it available to you. And if for some reason you don't get the follow-up after this email in the next day or two, again, you can reach out to us and let us know, and we'll make that available to you as well. I would actually just like to ask Ann and Heidi and Molly, if you have any additional thoughts or comments before we close out.
I would just encourage child care centers to consider this opportunity. It is not a child care source of funding. It is funding that is coming through either the Small Business Administration or through a financial institution. But this is the time to really claim your place as a small business. And center directors and owners often are hesitant to claim that role as a small business and take advantage of some of the things that may not feel like they are directly designed for childcare. I would encourage you to seek assistance in applications. There are lots of entities providing technical assistance for these processes. Go back through this webinar, ask lots of questions. Don't be afraid to call your accountant, your bookkeeper, your payroll provider to dig into the answers that you need for these applications. But these are processes that are not designed for childcare, but do not let that stop you from applying. It has never been more important for childcare centers to be able to access federal relief. And don't be intimidated. Just keep asking questions until you get the answer or the information that you need to put forth a successful application.
Thanks so much, Heidi. I'm going to have Sarah actually has a few poll questions, if you don't mind answering before we end today. And I would just like to say very much thank you to Shannon Christian and to the Office of Family Child Care for their commitment to all of you in the child care field, and also to all of you to your commitment and your hard work during this very difficult time. And Shannon, I'm not sure if you can see me, but if you'd like to say a few words before we close, just shake your head yes, and Sarah will make that magically happen.
Need to.
Sarah, there you go. She made it happen anyway. So on behalf of all of us, Shannon, really thank you so much for everything and for making this happen. And I'll turn it over to you. I think we lost her.
Oh.
We got you now.
Okay. There seems to be a time lag. So I hope people are encouraged by this. We want to be able to help as much as we possibly can, especially in the next few weeks when we think it matters the most. And so if you have ideas for us about how this could be different or better, or what we could be doing to help, please let the Office of Child Care know using any of the information outlets you have right now. But most of all, I just want to say how much I have enjoyed leading this amazing office with its incredibly devoted childcare providers of all kinds and amazing state administrators and territories and tribes. The amount of caring that this group represents in terms of heart and time and commitment is just incredible. And our TA providers, so just every day they amaze me with how much they can get done to help everyone, and how willing they are to put in the extra hours and to make sure they get it right. And then to my own team, which is just an incredible group of people. And I hope you found this useful, and I hope you will reach out to this group when you need their help more, and also tell people who weren't available for this webinar that it was recorded and that we can do more if you ask us. So thank you so much, and good luck getting through all this and coming out the other end better, stronger, and still serving children to the best of your ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. And again, one last poll question for all of you. All of this information will be made available to you through a variety of sources, including our website. And if you do have other needs, other ideas that you want to type in the chat before you log off, please do so. And if not, good luck. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day today to spend with us. And we sincerely appreciate all you do. And to our First Children's Finance friends, thank you so much for an informative and enlightening conversation.